Okay, time for my personal favourite bit, making things move. In this lesson, we'll be adding an effect called trim paths to our shape layer. This is basically so you can animate the stroke along the path. We'll then be looking at setting some keyframes for animation, and we're going to touch very lightly on the graph editor. So let's go. Great, so we've got our path and we've got our stroke on our path. So now we need to animate it. And the best way to animate the stroke doing the motion that we want, starting from nothing, expanding and shrinking again, is something called trim path. So you can actually trim the stroke along the path to a desired length. And to do that, we're going to add here. So up here are some special properties that you can add to shape layers. All kinds of fun things. So you don't really need to worry about any of these right now, apart from trim paths. We're going to add another one later, but we'll get to that in a minute. And trim paths goes down here below the shape. It automatically adds it in here, but you can add it kind of anywhere else. You can drag it around. If you put it anywhere in here, it will do the same thing, apart from maybe above it. So as long as it's below path, I think that's a good place for it. And I'm going to expand out trim paths, and then you get some options in here. So it's a fairly simple one. You get start percentage, end percentage, and then you get an offset. So you can ignore the other two options, offset and trim multiple shapes. We're just going to be animating the start and end. To animate a property in After Effects, you may have seen these stopwatches all around everywhere. These are all the properties that you can animate. By default, all the animation for all the properties are off. So if you want to animate a property, you need to click on the stopwatch. So if we turn on animation for start and end, you can see that they've turned blue, and we've got a few more things that have appeared. These two things here that have appeared are called keyframes, and they basically hold the value of these properties. This one is currently at 100%, and this one is currently at 0%. If you set more keyframes with different values further along in time, then these properties will animate accordingly. This playhead will show you what's happening in this composition at any given time. So it's exactly like YouTube or any other video playing software that you might have used. This shows you where you are in the timeline. So if I move forward a bit and I change these values, so let's trim the end. So if we trim the end, you can see that our line is getting shorter. So if we go down to 0, and then if I go back to the start and press play, so if I just press spacebar, it will animate to that keyframe down to nothing. So it goes from 100, and if you look over here, it's showing you what the number is across time. So we drag it and it goes all the way down to 0. So that's basically how the animation works in After Effects. So what we want is let's just sort of fiddle with the buttons until we've understood what we want to do. So I'm going to drag the end down, so we go down to the bottom. And then, so we want it to start down here, we want it to expand out like that, and then we want it to collapse again like this, using the start. So we want the end to go from 0 to 100, and then we want the start to go from 0 to 100. And that way we'll get a nice line moving from left to right out of the center. So I'm going to delete these keyframes here. Oh yeah, sorry, it was worth noting that once you've turned these properties on, for animation, any changes that you make, it will make a new keyframe. So if I move along, change the property, it will keep making keyframes. So automatically put a keyframe when you change the property. And you can also box select these by dragging and selecting multiple ones and move them around. You can also copy and paste them. So if I do Control-C or Command-C on a Mac, move it forward, paste it, it will then paste whatever value that keyframe holds, it will paste it here. So have a play around, get your head around manipulating these keyframes. So we want to start with start on 0, and we want to start with the end on 0 as well. So we want 0, 0. So you can see that the stroke is essentially at the left-hand side of this. And then we're going to move forward a little bit. And then I want the end to be at 100%, so that we have the line moving this way. And then I want the start to be at 100%, so we have the end, the left-hand side of the line moving to the right as well. And then when we see this animation, nothing happens. And that's because they're both moving at the same rate. So you can't see these values are the same. So if these are the same, then it means nothing. So maybe I'm confusing it a little bit. But you'll see what I mean when we make the next change. So we want the end to move across first, and then we want the start to move across afterwards. So now we get this line moving across like this. If we move the start behind the end. So if we press play on that, we get this nice sort of beam running across. So our next goal is to make this look really nice. We want it to start off really fast and then slow down like an explosion. So we want it to go like fast and then slow. And to do that, we're going to do some easing. Great, so let's just quickly recap what we learned in this lesson. First, we added a trim paths effect to our shape layer, which can be found in the add menu. It's like a special property of a shape layer so that we can animate our path. We then went through using the stopwatch, which can be found on the left-hand side of most of the properties in After Effects. Once this stopwatch is on, it will set a keyframe at the time that you are, where the playhead is in the timeline. And if you move the playhead forwards or backwards from that time and then change the property, it will set another keyframe with the value that you changed it to. This is how all animation works in After Effects. We then adjusted the timing that we'd made on the animation on the trim paths. Great, so the animation we have currently won't cut it as a pop. The motion is a bit too linear and boring. So in the next lesson, we're going to add some easing. So I'll see you there.